Does the thought of having to come up with a track plan from scratch give you hives? Have you ever found a published track plan for a layout that you thought was a great idea for your own space, but it wasn't quite right, so you ended up giving up on it? Hi everybody, I'm Joe Parker of the Pixel Depot, and welcome to my series on building the small layout I'm calling the Grunge. My goal here is to show you that you can build a great layout in a small space and hope that it will convince you to build something on your own. You can even build this one along with me. In episode 1 of this series, I talked about how I came up with the concept for the layout. In this episode, we're going to discuss how I took the track plan I found and modified it to suit my needs, including some of the things I considered and ultimately decided against. Before we start, I'd ask that you subscribe to the channel for ongoing information about model railroading, including planning, hints, tips, how-tos, and updates. Click on the bell so you'll get notified when there is new content available. And if you click the thumbs up to like this video now, you won't have to worry about it later. So without further delay, let's get to today's topic, coming up with a track plan. You may say, Joe, it's a small layout, why would I bother with a track plan? Well, my personal opinion is that it's important to have a track plan when you build a layout of just about any size. I also think that becomes more important as the size of the layout grows. Now, having said that, there are people out there who have built really great large layouts without any plan at all. Personally, I can't work that way. And I think for every great layout that gets built, how many others get started and end in disaster, where in disaster equals in the dumpster? With a track plan, I think you're better able to visualize how everything's going to fit, and I also think it makes it easier to see how your track is going to work before you actually spend the time and money to lay any real track down. You can draw a track plan yourself, no question, but for the beginner, that may not be as easy as it seems. In theory, you can do anything you want. In reality, there are some basic standards and rules of thumb to follow. While there's a good chunk of modelers out there who love track planning and layout design, there's also a large contingent who don't enjoy it at all. If you're among the group who likes it, like me, great. But if the very thought causes you to panic, don't worry. There are literally thousands of track plans out there that you can use. Most model railroad magazines include at least one track plan in each issue, and beyond that, you can find track plans in books, articles, websites, videos, and more. You can either copy these faithfully or modify them to suit your needs. The last option is what we're going to do for the Grunge layout. As I mentioned, after thinking about what I wanted for this layout, I remembered some articles on a layout called the 59th and Rust. It was featured in the April 2019 issue of Model Railroader and the November 2020 issue of Railroad Model Craftsman. It depicts a compact, gritty inner-city alley. It's the kind of place where I'd be a little scared to live, but it's a really great place to try and model. It fit the motif I was after, and I ended up using the layout's track plan as the inspiration for my own. I will be showing you my track plan here, but the published track plan drawings are copyrighted, so I can't include them in the video. Instead, I'll provide a link in the description below for you to follow along with. The original layout serves 4 industries as well as a team track, and has a track that you can use for temporary storage. One of the 2 industries has a loading dock that's served by 2 tracks, one on each side of the dock. On the left side of the layout, track runs between the buildings and under a connector bridge. The original layout was used for exhibitions, so the owner would use a 24-inch fiddlestick to allow him to have some extra breathing room for operations on that side. The original layout also has 2 tracks on the right side that go off-scene, where the owner attaches a 4-foot fiddle yard for swapping cars. The original layout had spots for about 13 cars. I didn't use the track plan as published for a few reasons. One, the original layout is 18 inches by 96 inches, or 1.5 feet by 8 feet. My space is only 15 inches by 90 inches, so the original plan is a little bigger than that space. I knew I'd need to trim everything down a little bit. There's also an industry at the center front that on the original plan is about 5 inches from the front edge. More on that in a second. Number 2, the original layout uses pico switches, and there appear to be 5 small radius turnouts and 2 3-way turnouts. Now, I have some Pico Code 100 small radius turnouts from a previous project that I was planning to use for this project anyway. However, those 3-way turnouts aren't cheap, so I decided to try and find a way around using them. Number 3, I don't like copying anything exactly. I'd rather put my own stamp on it, even if they're only minor tweaks. These were choices I made based on the original design itself. There were some additional changes I made that were actually requirements to fit this space. I don't have the luxury of additional track on the right-hand side. That ends up against the wall, and it was clear during my negotiations that even if I wanted to cut through that wall, which to be honest I didn't, but if I wanted to, that just wasn't going to happen. It was not an option. So on the Grunge, the track on that left-hand side will end at the edge of the layout, and a mirror will provide the illusion of additional track. My space limitations also mean that I only have 3 feet on the right-hand side before I run into the wall again. So I'll be using a single 36-inch fiddlestick for my staging. So let's talk about the steps I used to go from published track plan to my own finished track plan. Although I can't show the published plan, I created a quick mock-up in Third Planet, which is the planning software that I use. So the first thing I knew was that there would be no track on the left. The wall there prevents it. The next thing I tackled was a way around using those 2 3-way switches. You can, of course, use 2 normal turnouts in place of a single 3-way switch to get the same number of tracks if you have the room. The trade-off is that you need a lot of additional length to fit them in. In this small footprint, that really wasn't an option, especially since my footprint was already 6 inches shorter than the original plan. So this would require some track removal. If we take a lay of the land here, the third leg of the 3-way switch on the left goes to the second track serving a single industry. The 3-way switch on the right provides access to the industry at the front center, and that track can also be used as a small team track per the articles, as well as access to the second fiddle yard track. The problem with the industry at the front center of the layout is that I have to cut 3 inches off of my layout. If I do that, that industry there will end up dangerously close to the front edge of the layout, at least in my opinion. Since I could use the small storage track for a team track, I saw no point in trying to save the front center industry track. It was also my opinion that I didn't need 2 tracks for the industry on the left. I could get away with a single track, and by removing one of the switches, I might even be able to lengthen it so that I can get 3 cars in there instead of just 2. And finally, since I no longer needed access to the front industry and feel like I can get away with using only a single track fiddle yard, I can remove the second staging track completely. About that staging yard track. He used a 48-inch track. My staging fiddlestick will only be 36 inches because of my space limitations. Now I could remove the 3-way switches, and since I now had a little extra room, I could move the runaround a little further out so that there could be some additional scenic options between the tracks. Here's what the final track plan looks like. In order to use the Walther's hardwood furniture kit I have, I've moved everything a little further from the backdrop. More on the industries and structures I chose in a later episode. If you're thinking about building this layout along with me, I'll include a link to the track plan in the description below. So in the final count, I ended up with 3 industries instead of 4, plus a team track area, and I kept the ability to use that track for shuffling cars. I ended up using 6 pico small radius turnouts instead of 5, and avoided using the more costly 3-way switches entirely. I have spots for 9 cars instead of the 13 on the original, but I still think that'll provide plenty of operating potential. I suspect this layout will easily support a 45 to 60 minute operating session, maybe more if you operate very prototypically. One thing I want to call out specifically is the runaround. If you're new to model railroading, this does not refer to someone who won't give you an answer. It actually refers to this track in the middle that allows the locomotive to run around the train and push or pull from the other end. Even with the changes I made, it was important from an operational standpoint to keep the runaround track in the middle. This is one reason I kept the storage track / team track where it was, rather than make that the entrance to the layout or something along those lines. Since there are industries on both sides of the layout and the tracks face different directions, you have to have a way to get the engine on both sides of the cars in order to get cars in and out of each track. So for your own purposes, I think what I've done in this video shows that you don't have to come up with a track plan from scratch. You can easily use the published track plan and build it exactly as presented if that works for your preferences and space. But if it doesn't, you don't need to be limited to what you find. If that plan doesn't quite match what you need, you can logically go through the criteria that you set up personally and make changes until it works for you. This can include the simple changes to a small plan, like I made here, all the way up to adding or removing entire sections to a larger plan. Even if you've never drawn any kind of track plan before, this is a great way to get started and try things out. Another point I want to make is that you don't need to limit yourself to finding a track plan that's a close size match to your space. I did that here, and it can be helpful to do that, but you might also be able to replicate a small part or section of a much larger layout design. You can pull out the bits you like from a single plan or even multiple designs, and then make changes to fit your situation. Now, I've designed and built a number of layouts to some level of completion, both on my own and as a member of a model railroad club. And I'll say right here up front, they almost never go exactly the way you think they will on paper. Remember, it's a plan, it's not set in stone. So there's a good chance the final version of the Grunge layout, even though it's small, isn't going to look exactly like this plan. And that's okay. Along the way, if I make changes, I'll explain why I decided to make the change, what I think the new solution is, and how I got there. So with the track plan in place, now it's time to think about building the benchwork for the layout. There are some options here, especially for a layout of this size. So in the next episode, I will talk about that, as well as show you how I build the benchwork. One last thing before we go. If you think you'd be interested in track planning and layout design, you might consider joining the Layout Design Special Interest Group. I'll include the link in the description. I've learned a lot about planning and track design from this group, and it might be just what you're looking for if it seems like something you're interested in. Even if you don't join, the website has some really great information available for free. That's all for this episode. I hope this will get you thinking about how you could come up with a track plan for your own small layout. If you have suggestions or questions, include them in the comments below. If you've built a small layout already, I would love to hear how you settled on a track plan. Tell us in the comments. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, click the thumbs up to like it so it will get saved to your liked playlist. I'm Joe Parker of the Pixel Depot. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll meet me next time in the train room. That's all for this episode. I hope this video will get you thinking about what you can come up with for a track plan, and I'm going to blow that, so I'm just going to go back and do it from scratch here once and for all. And then we're going to call it a day, because this is the end, guys. It's the end. It's the end.